Would you rather always have to wear wet socks or always have to wear shoes that are too tight?
Oh.
My current shoes kind of are too tight, so I'm already living it, man. Wet socks are gross, though. One thing that's worse than wet socks is putting on socks you've been wearing all day. Like taking them off in the day, then put them back on. That is so terrible.
Yeah, if you're just living in wet socks, your whole foot becomes a bog. And then you get like super gangrenous up in there. You're going to lose your feet anyway. And then you're not even going to have the privilege of wearing tight shoes. So I'm going tight shoes. There are people that wear tight shoes like when they rock climb, that sort of thing. You can kind of get used to it. You might want to lose a toe or two just to make it like slightly less cramped.
I feel like people are missing some context here. One of the members of this podcast is missing it.
Guess who?
Join our Discord and we'd like you to guess who is missing a toe.
He makes up for it, though.
So, Shem, you're going for tight shoes as well?
Yeah, all day. I'm already doing it, so,
I guess it's the decision between, apart from, future considerations like gangrene, as Sam said, it's kind of a decision between, pain and, just feeling yuck the whole time. So, I don't know. Slight pain. It's maybe better.
Well, I don't know, but you could choose not to walk much, right? And your feet won't hurt if you've got tight shoes on. But if you're just wearing wet socks all day, that's nasty no matter what you're doing. So
that's a good point. Get tight shoes, one of those kind of electric wheelchairs, you're sorted.
And this is where we throw back to the last episode where Shem and Zach decided that they are singing everywhere. Whenever they talk, they sing. So they've got sore feet, they're singing about their sore feet. The problem for me is I'm dancing everywhere with tight shoes.
We're slowly building out this character each week.
Guys, maybe eventually this podcast will have people send in fan art and they can do.
I hope so.
Welcome to the Lens and Veil podcast. Join Shem, Sam, and Zach as they dive into a designer-focused analysis of Path of Civilization, a game from Fabien Gridel.
So this week we are talking about Path of Civilization. This is what the publisher calls a nation management game, or just a civ game, as we'd probably refer to it as. In this game, you are basically telling the story of your empire or your nation over the entire sort of span of human history, all from ancient times right through to the modern era. The game is set over 9 rounds, and you start with 5 cards in hand. At each round, you're playing down 4 of those cards for various benefits. And at the end of the round, you're going to be just basically discarding one of those cards you didn't play and then buying a new card. So it has this nice kind of cycling of slowly upgrading the cards you have in hand. So the first step is you play out your 4 cards that you want onto these 4 spaces of your player board. And then the 2 cards you play on the left side of your board are going to generate, most rounds at least, not the first few rounds, but they're going to generate some agents for you. These are cubes that you place onto one of, I think, 5 spots, which you can then use kind of expended the resources for various things. We're going to go through those phases. So everyone's going to gather those agents and place them. Players may gain movement on this philosophy track. They may purchase a wonder. They might hire a leader for their player board. And then after that, everyone's going to use the 2 cards on the right side of the board to move up these various tracks. There are 5 tracks in the game, and I'm just trying to wing what they are. I think it's culture, science, religion or spirituality, military, and industry. I think they are. And these tracks you're bumping up are basically kind of threshold you're trying to hit to buy better cards. So each round you're going to try and push usually 1 or 2 tracks with the intention of buying a card from that path for the next round, essentially. So once everyone's kind of gained those bumps on the tracks, that's when they then purchase 1 card for the round. It's also going to come with some nice immediate benefits, which are also quite tactical. And at the end of the round, there's usually an event. The first 2 rounds is kind of like a little bit of a breather, and from then on it kind of alternates between a sort of a more economy-focused event and then there's a military event, and it kind of doubles back, alternating those 2 on and off until the 9 rounds ends. And the victory goes to the player with the most points, which come from a variety of spaces, but some are gained throughout the game. A lot of them are on your wonders and your leaders, or the philosophy track, or on your population track. and lots of the cards that you purchase are worth points as well.
So did you guys feel like you were building up a nation? Did you guys feel like you were teleported into the history of some amazing civilization or empire that you were building up from the Stone Age all the way through to atomic bombs and internet?
Not entirely.
Because although each player board has a civilization's name on it or something, and you have some different starting resources, it does not feel very different when you're playing with a different board. I played it a number of times and I never really noticed very much difference. And so that doesn't really make you feel like you're playing a specific civ, even though they have a specific civ name. So yeah, the immersion in the setting wasn't really there for me.
There's a lot of digital games out there and other board games that do this kind of theme as well, where it's like trying to tell the entire human history in one snapshot. And personally, I've never really gravitated towards those games. I love a game that focuses in on like one thing or a one time period at least. So like Age of Empires is my favorite of those games of all time, because it's like focusing on those people and not trying to say like, oh, you start out with like villages and at the end of the game you've got like a massive skyscraper empire type thing going on. I would have loved the theming of this game a lot more if it was just one people group or one moment in history or whatever it might be. That would have been far more inviting for me, I guess, as a player, to really explore this kind of smaller story rather than trying to tell this big story through a game that's quite abstracted in a way. This is a very, very cool game. I like this game a lot. Just don't want to start on a very negative note. This is a cool game mechanically. Lots of cool stuff going on. But the presentation and the kind of the theming and the overall like what's going to pull you into the game from the look of it and the story being told is not that captivating, really. That's kind of where it drops a little bit for me. But mechanically speaking, there's a lot of cool stuff here, down to how you're playing out your cards each round. So you've got these 5 cards. You're going to play down 2 for one type of resource and then 2 for a different type of resource, essentially. One is cubes you place, one is tracks you bump. And one card gets burned. It's gone. So in the very first round, you have 1 card for each track. And you're saying, I don't want this card for next round. So you don't have access to that track necessarily unless you buy a card that gives you that access again. So that's a very cool thing. The other cool thing I like about this mechanically is how these cards work. So there's 20 cards in the game, 20 technology cards. There's 4 from each of the 5 branches of what do you want to call it, of the civilization. And how their relationships to the other parts is quite interesting. And Sam, we did something similar with Paladins where if you say use faith, you're going to use your faith to either get strength or influence. Was it influence? I can't remember. I'm trying to think back to our own game.
Yeah.
But if you do that, you spend different resources and stuff. But they kind of, if you do A, you get B or C. Is kind of the general kind of thing of it. And this game has that as well, but with the 5 tracks. So if you buy a card that is orange, which is the science, adjacent to the orange tracks on either side is green and blue, which is your culture and your religion. So if you get a card down that middle, the orange one, it's going to give you that card is going to give you icons to bump up the 2 tracks next to it, and the resources it gives you is most likely going to be pushing up or helping for that track again, with a bit of overlap between the 2 tracks next to it. I think that's really clever.
Yeah, so if you want to lean into science, for example, you buy a bunch of science cards, but now you realize these science cards don't actually allow you to generate science points or science research bumps. You're going to actually need to boost your culture, pick up culture cards and spirituality cards in order to boost science. So the game designers are sort of forcing you to pivot. Like you can't just lean into one thing, but you can ignore things. I think that's where the interesting decision is not in the things you lean into, but the things that you ignore, because you can't do everything well. You need to do several things well, but you can't do everything well.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning that each card that you buy also gives you like an instant gratification of giving you a bunch of agents that it gets sent out or bumps on the population track. So sometimes the card that you buy is for those resources that you're going to be able to get from it the next turn, but sometimes it's also for the instant bump, getting a whole bunch of scribes out, which might help you then with like an event. As Shem said, there's an event each round, or a whole bunch of soldiers out if there's a battle for that round. So you kind of have a number of reasons why you might want to buy a certain card.
Yeah, I really like. I was thinking about this morning. I really like that immediate effect of the cards because the game's only 9 rounds long, so you're only getting, I guess, 9 new cards, but one you won't actually be using technically. So if you think of like an engine builder or a deck builder, often there's this long kind of arc of the game where you see the influence of these cards you're getting there. Like you get this one card in the first round, you might see it, 10 to 15 times throughout the game in like a classic deck builder, for example, and you really feel that card being in your deck. Whereas this game, it's at a length where you do notice the cards you get, but they're not massively impactful into the last few rounds. So those immediate effects that are on those cards when you buy them is quite huge, and a really good design decision to inform which card you get, not only for this like ongoing card, but for this immediate little tactical jump on something else.
Even at its most basic, the final round, they don't have to do any rules like skip this step in the final round, because buying the card will give you the immediate benefit. So the decision is still really interesting for that final round. And every resource that you can gain will score some points. But I think some of them are better than others. Like buying a military card in the final round was going to give you a lot of military power. And that hasn't been checked yet when you buy the card. But there are other things that you can't spend quite as well, but you will get the consolation points.
Yeah, and I think there's what you said about timing there for the final round is kind of all throughout the game. There's those kind of timing moments because maybe you need a few more. I can't remember what they're called, builders to buy a wonder the next round, and maybe there's a wonder which has popped out, which is gonna boost the strategy that you're going for a whole bunch. And so if you get that, that's gonna give you a whole bunch of points. But maybe other people are going for it too, and picking up the right card at the right time, which gives you that instant benefit, which gets you to a level above the others, is gonna help you to maximize your points.
Yeah, how did you guys feel about this core decision, the main decision it feels like you're making with the core loop of you've got your 5 cards, you're playing 2 into resource slots, 2 into research bumps, and destroying 1. When I first heard about this, I thought that was really interesting. The fact that you've always got 5 cards, you're always destroying a card each round. I almost wanted a little bit more tension and angst about which one I'm losing. Most of the time, it's a pretty obvious decision. You just get rid of your worst card, or, at the start of the game, you can lose any of them. It's kind of fine. Like, it will dictate your early strategy, which cards you can get early a little bit. But yeah, how do you guys feel about that decision?
I think in the 6 or 7 games I've played, I felt that tension about not wanting to throw out the card that I threw out about twice. So that's not very many times. It does happen occasionally. But yeah, generally you've got a plan and it's not really bothering you, the card that you're throwing out.
For the record, like, even if there isn't tension from that decision, it's still a cool design decision they've put in this game, because it is limiting the amount of options each player has on their turn, right? They're only going to play 4 cards and they're going to get rid of 1 so that, they don't have, by the end of the game, 12, 13 cards or whatever to choose from. So it still is a cool design decision. I just felt like it was a potentially really epic mechanism that didn't quite get to where it maybe could have.
Yeah, I think it's intentional for the feel of the game. So some games have a very upfront heavy decision space where you have to think through a lot of ramifications for what you're doing. And other games are like, here's some micro decisions, and they're going to push you down a path, which we were talking earlier about this, how I feel this game gives me the vibe or the feeling of like a roll and write, because like your decisions are quite small, minute, but they do push you down a path, and it is your doing that you went down that path. It's not a random effect or anything. But what the cool thing is about these cards, because there's 5 tracks, and they kind of, each card in a way touches on 3 of those tracks. For example, if I get a military card, I could play it for resources, which is going to be more soldiers, so it's giving me more of the military kind of focus. Or if I play it on the other side of my board, it's going to push up the 2 tracks next to military. So there is that good decision about what am I going to use it for. I've got the strong card. Do I need those soldiers right now, the military cubes? Or do I just go, I've got enough of those right now, I'll play this on the other side? And I agree that the first kind of half of the game isn't that interesting, because it is kind of quite obvious. Like, you're going to burn those grey cards at the start. The first 5 rounds, they're gone. But it's once you get into sort of the round 5 or 6, that's when there's some cool decisions about like, oh, which things do I really need to focus on? Am I getting lots of cubes for building? But if I do that, those cards aren't bumping the tracks. Those are my best cards. And that's the cool thing as well, how each tier of the cards, there's 4 tiers of cards. Your basic ones that you start with give you 1 track bump. And then the next tier gives you 2 track bumps, and then 3, and then 4, I think it is, and then 5. And then the resources go up the same way from 0 to 4. So every tier of card, I guess if you say there's 0s through 5s, I guess we call them, the track bumps they give you for the right-hand side of your board is kind of equal to, well, +1 of the level, I guess, or equal to the level. 1 through 5, I guess, would be equal to the level. Whereas the resources on the left side is kind of -1. So every cool card you get, if you get a level 4 card, it's like, oh, you can get 4 resources or 5 track bumps. Which do you want?
And this kind of touches on player psychology, at least for me, like a little bit, where when comparing which side to play the card into, I would naturally lean towards the research bumps, because that has, to me, in my mind, that has a feeling of permanence. Like I'm boosting my research and boosting my technology. So I would lean towards that. But they've actually balanced these cards so that cubes are slightly stronger than research bumps. And so you have to actually teach yourself, wait up, these cubes actually might be more useful. The other thing that's really interesting, actually, is that the cubes and the research bumps, the cubes are essentially just a track. Like it's actually the same thing, it's just disguised. Because you're placing your cubes into one of these 5 areas and you spend them like you spend the research. And so maybe this is just to make it feel like it's a slightly different thing for the players, but really they're sort of functioning the same way. You pull up your resources in a particular area and then you spend them down. That's the same thing for the cubes and the research. Do you think there's like a player psychology thing in that, like they're sort of disguising the fact that they are the same? Like, do you ever make those sort of decisions in your design? Like, I don't want to have 12 tracks in this game, so let's like put cubes in different spaces to make it simulate a track.
Definitely. I do the same thing for resources. I know people will disagree with me, but I quite like having something cardboard, something wood, something metal, or something plastic, or something like different physical pieces, like the makeup of them, because it helps your brain go, oh, those are different. They're different things. And you're right, if you had 10 tracks in this game, that's a lot to manage and to consider what I have. So I think it does help break down that little bit in your brain of like, oh, this is that and this is this, and how they work for sure.
I think it also adds to like the interaction of the game. Okay, so if you just had tracks and you're going, so there is the military track, right? So first of all, if you had military points plus the military track, it would be a little bit weird. But like seeing those soldier cubes there and being like, oh, who's got lots of soldiers out? Or, you know, for example, on the wonders, like seeing those cubes there and that threat of like, is another player going to bid on the same one as me? It's a little bit more visual. It provides a little bit more urgency. That it's kind of that psychology question, but in a different way. I think it helps those mini games feel competitive in a way that I think just having like tracks and the mini game saying spend this track to move along, it wouldn't give that same sense of urgency and competition in the multiplayer game, I think.
So there is that usability there, because what I was going to say is game design, it's just smoke and mirrors. but maybe it's not. Maybe there is actually a little bit of usability that this is improving. Yeah, because those are slightly more competitive areas than which cards you're going to buy, who's going to rush ahead on the philosophy track, who's going to race to win that leader first, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, so for the tracks, all you need to know is like, oh, where are the tracks? What card could they get? The only thing I think that affects, if I'm wrong, could be right, no, I think it is the yellow and the red cubes. So a card you get could add more soldiers or could add more sages. That's the only thing the tracks can affect as far as interaction goes. So all you do is glance over. Yeah, you glance over, you go, oh, they're quite high on that track. They could get a card that adds more to that thing. Otherwise, yeah, the tracks aren't really important to watch other players so much. So I think you're right. It's about being able to quickly see how competitive other players are in a certain area. Yeah, and the game is very tactical, which is probably why it appeals to my taste quite a bit. Often when Sam and I will play a new game together in person, if there's any kind of engine building in the game, there's always this kind of gambit of like, how effective is that engine building going to be in the game, in the design? So if the designers have put like a lot of emphasis on engine building as the thing you should be doing, Sam's most likely going to win the game when I first play, like because he's going to focus on that. Where if the engine building's like it's there but it's not necessary, then I might have a chance of winning that game because I'm much more of a tactical player. So I like games where you can read the board, look for the moment to kind of jump and pivot to something and grab that juicy benefit because it helps you in the moment. Which you will see that in a lot of our games. While most of our games are quite strategic, I love having tactical moments. So for an example, the townsfolk cards coming out in Paladins, like looking for those little moments where you can dismiss them for a cool benefit. I love that stuff in games. And this game has that in spades, I think, just for like, look for that one thing you can jump on to then pivot to this thing and then get something else, which makes it very fun. And again, gives me that kind of roll and write vibe because it's like, oh, I can do this, say this, I change to that and do that. Not that it's like an ongoing chaining game, but it has those feels.
It's really interesting because I approach the game a completely opposite way. And I think there is a lot for a strategic player to play this game. And so that's actually up to my appreciation for this game, that you sort of approached it tactically. Like, what's the combo that you can do boom, 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 with a little chain. I'm here looking at all of the rounds from 1 to 9 and almost planning like every single card, which card I'm going to take when. I obviously can't foresee like all of where I'm going to be on the tracks and stuff, but I'm going to get a general idea of like how many of which card I want by a certain point. Because this game is pretty much perfect information. The only new information that's coming out each round is like a few wonder cards and a few leader cards. And then there's like a really minor bonus that's revealed when the first player moves to the thresholds on the philosophy track. So if you really wanted to, you could take a lot of time and plan out most of your game just from the start. The thing I think they've done really well is the events. I think it's quite interesting that every second round there's a military event. This happens in lots of games, like, 7 Wonders and all that sort of thing. We compare who's got the most strength. I think that's cool. Making every second round is just enough that you could feel leaning into it will reward you, but you could also not lean into it at all and you don't feel too negatively impacted. But then the other event is it's not to do with having the most. It's just like everyone gets a benefit based on how well they've leaned into this thing. So it's going to include your sages, which are cubes you place down in the yellow area, which will get spent. But the thing that it also includes is cards that you've collected of a certain type. And in the setup, it's going to guarantee that there's going to be one from each of the 4 tracks that are not science. So there will be a culture event, there will be a spirituality event, there will be an industry, that are not military. There will be an industry event and there will be a science event. And so one of the cool puzzles, I think, is planning out if you can hit that track. I'm going to go culture early, into science, into spirituality, maybe skipping one of those tiers so that you can lean into the next one extra hard. Maybe we should talk a little bit about the breadth, all the different things going on, all the diverse areas to look at, and that, because that's essentially the number of mini games that are present in the game. So you've got the mini game of who's got the most strength, and that's all your military. You've got the mini game of the wonders, which I would suggest is very important for winning the game. I wouldn't say you always have to go hard on wonders, but they're the most obvious, I feel, way of just scoring a good lot of points. Then you've got the mini game of the leaders, which is similar to the wonders. Those are ongoing powers, typically, and the wonders are typically immediate stuff or in-game scoring stuff. And then you've got the mini game of the challenges, which is every other round where your sages and the cards that you've collected will generate points and other research bumps. And then finally, the one that feels like the odd duck, I feel, is like just a little bit different from the others. It's not part of a pair, is the philosophers. So it's that philosophy track where you spend your philosophy cubes, you spend them to kind of bump up a track. For me, I like having all of these mini games in the game. There's a trade-off because it's more noise, it's more things to explain. But I like having all these mini games in the game though, because it makes me wonder, like, if I play next time, what's going to happen if I go hard into military? Or what's going to happen if I just buy a ton of ambassadors? Or if I go hard into wonders? It's that feeling of replayability just from picking a different path. It's not from, hey, we've got a few different cards out this game. They're not going with the variability angle, really. It's about choosing a path, which more appeals to my tastes.
Yeah, so on the topic of replayability, it's an interesting one because I feel the main replayability in this game really is just, is it fun? For me, at least. I mean, there are these different paths you can try out, and I have tried to focus heavily on one. Like, I'm just going to all industry this game and try and get as many brown cards as I can. It kind of works. It doesn't quite work. Like, you do have to mix and mingle the tracks. But really, for me, it's like, do I enjoy playing this? Yes, I do. And that's the replayability factor. And also, it's a little bit of that kind of like trying to beat your own score a bit, which, even though it's multiplayer, it does feel kind of like beat your own score a little bit, even in that, because it's so simultaneous. So like we're sharing our scores over the last few days of like what we're playing solo, and Sam pulls out this massive score of 107. I'm like, oh damn, my highest score was like 92 before that. Can I get anywhere close? And got to 100, but still far behind. So that's quite a cool, fun feeling of accomplishment. Like, can I do better? And I don't think, you might disagree, I don't think it's about trying to find which path is the best. I think it's about like trying to form that perfect pattern within the paths you're choosing throughout the game.
Yeah, to hit the events well, like a good Terra Mystica game, you want to leverage your economy and then scoring at the right points to be both building up your engine nicely, but hitting the points with that engine at the same time.
The perfect union of strategy and tactics, right, guys?
Exactly.
Now, I have to agree that has been kind of a fun challenge. For example, I tried the military track one time and it just did not go well for me and I didn't really enjoy it. So pretty much all my games have been in the other mini games, but you know, I've had really good scores there. So I feel like in terms of those different areas of the game, like they are quite balanced, and the fact that it doesn't feel like any one is super overpowered, or if you ignore it, you're not going to do well. Maybe the population, like you need to boost that at some point because otherwise it's going to hurt you too much. But it doesn't feel like there's anything that's essential and you have to do that.
I think that really comes down to the way that they have designed the economy of the game. So, like if you're looking at those challenge cards, it's about like how many of this card do you have, plus the sages which you basically spend for points. So they're all very similar in that respect. Like, because it's just basically a point per sage you add, no matter what point they score. And then how many of those cards do you have? And it's hard to get those cards. Like, it's hard to really focus on a lot of the same card. You have to kind of get the wonders and the leaders as well to kind of get that benefit. So they're not going to be massive swings is what I'm getting at. It's mostly about the sages. But below that on each of those cards, there's also a thing of like, I think it's half of your point value gets turned into some kind of track bump. So that can give you a little bit of a pivot towards something else. But those cards are all going to be very similar, except for the top part, which is quite unique. And those are things you can look at the start of the game. The mathematics, I guess, below the game is very solid, is what I'm kind of getting at. So that these scores are always going to be very similar. There are some breakpoints in terms of competition, like for military, or for like how much you focus on a certain thing. So if you focus heavily on that philosophy board, then the points is going to swing far greater at the end. So I don't think you can just kind of just waddle through pushing up all 5 tracks and do well, because you need to focus on at least one or two things, I think, to do well.
So when I first learned this game, before all the points added up and I actually figured out where I got my points from, I thought that the cards that you destroyed, well, the cards that you destroy and like get rid of, they will score points, right? But I thought that you don't score the cards that you haven't destroyed. And I sort of thought that was a little bit interesting, if that was actually the rule. It's not the rule. You score every card that you purchase throughout the game. But what do you guys think the game would have been like if that were the case? If that you don't actually score your final 5 cards, you just score the things you've destroyed up to that point?
I don't think the arc of the game is good for that, because in the last round, the 5 cards you have will be from the last 4 rounds of purchasing or whatever it might be. Can't do the math. But like you basically have to burn your good cards early on to make that work, which means the way to really try and do that would be holding your 5 great or 4 great cards maybe for the entire game. But
It's a different strategy.
yeah, I can definitely see a thing where like the cards you tuck are like double points or something.
Right.
And also buying a card in the last round, it could be worth 3 points. So you don't want to say like you don't score those cards. So I can definitely see why, like on the surface, you'd think that it might be the case. But I think it's only a 9-round game. You're only going to get, how many good cards? I guess 9 good cards. So you want to score them all, I guess.
I guess this is where I want to just put a destroy effect in there at some point, or like I want that to be the third lever on the card. Like you've got the 2 different things, make it a triple use card, not a double use card. I don't know. Something in me wants like that decision to be more impactful.
I was going to say this feels like one of those mini design decisions that you come across when you're making your first prototype and you're like, oh, this is a really cool mechanism. And it sounds really good in theory. And then you try it and it's just like, actually, this just doesn't work at all.
Yeah. How do we feel about the simultaneous play in this game?
We're having a simultaneous pause. I think the simultaneous play works for this game, for what it's trying to achieve. It fits the mechanisms. There are several phases each round, and each phase is simultaneous, but you don't move on to the next phase until everyone's finished that phase. But one thing they do well for the wonders and the leaders in acquiring those cards, and during the simultaneous phase, people spend their cubes onto the card that they want to grab. And say you did that before someone else, you don't just get to take the card. You have to wait till the end of the phase to figure out who gets the card. And on our player boards, we've got a little hierarchy of our priority of each of the different card types. So I might have maximum priority for military, and all of the player boards have a completely unique hierarchy of each of these. And if I've got maximum priority for military and Zach puts a bid on a military card, I could decide later that phase after him that I'm going to claim this or put my cubes on that card. And then Zach would have to redistribute his cubes to a different card or preserve them for another round because my player board has priority in that area. And so I think they got around the whole, like, how do we have interaction in a game with simultaneous play pretty well with that tiebreak system.
Yeah, I think it's a very clever system. I've designed games myself that have simultaneous play that I never considered a system like this. So I think having this tiebreak thing in a game that has simultaneous play is great because it allows you to do more with the interaction. Because my usual go-to is like, I just won't have interaction so that the game can be simultaneous, because that means the game can just keep tuning along without any kind of moments of let's pause, let's check the conditions, who's ahead, who's behind, all that kind of stuff. You can just keep streaming through the game, the maximum fun per second kind of thing. So it's very clever.
We hope you've enjoyed our discussion about Path of Civilization, but we'd love to hear from you. Jump on Garphill Game's Discord and let us know in the podcast channel if you've played Path of Civilization. How did you find the action mechanism with the 5 technology cards? Do you gravitate more towards games that give a player almost perfect information at the start, or games where each turn requires more tactical decisions? All right. If you could choose any game to have a legacy version, which one would you choose and why?
So I play a lot of these kind of games, the legacy games, with my family. That's a big factor for me. So we've played through all the My City kind of stuff. We've played the Ticket to Ride. Played what's it called? The Initiative. Tons of these games I love when they're lighter because I can play them with my family. Well, mainly with my wife, and who's not really a big gamer, and also with my 2 daughters who are currently 10 and 11. We've been playing these kind of games for a while though. So the game that I would like to see made as a legacy game for that reason would be Downforce, because we've had some real fun with this game. Mostly me and my daughters. We've played, I think twice now. We've done a day where we've played all 6 maps back to back, and it's the time just flies, and it's a lot of fun. So I'd love to see that game in legacy form, so we could play as a family. You could have so much crazy stuff happening with like the cards that get burned, or maybe there's like cards you acquire that are always yours at the start of each round. The tracks could be stickered, and all sorts of stuff could happen. So that'd be a ton of fun for me.
That's a really good answer. And one of these things that I find is that legacy games end up sitting on the shelves like a foot in a wet sock with no play and no respite. They need to get out of jail from sitting on these shelves. And part of it's just like it's such a big commitment to play a legacy game, right? And it's quite hard to get the same group of, especially when it's 3 or 4 people around, keep playing that game and not play other games. Like that's quite a cost for the players as well. Like, yes, if it's fun and you're loving it, then you'll just really be excited to play the next chapter. But often you're like, oh, but I want to play Terra Mystica or I want to play something else. So it's quite a cost. So I obviously don't really pursue these legacy experiences, though I've had some that have been fantastic. So my answer to that question would probably be Hansa Teutonica. Hansa Teutonica is a game where there's a ton of interaction. You're placing out cubes and discs to secure trade posts. Now, I could imagine that you could completely change the map. You could add new types of tokens, so not just cubes and discs, new ones that have other effects on the map. There might be a few spots that if you control them at the end of the game, then you'll control them at the start of the next game. You can imagine a bunch of different like little rules tweaks and story, new maps, all these sorts of things that would make each play of Hansa more and more exciting. And that would be a great way to play it more, because I really want to play that game more.
When I come to New Zealand, Sam, we can play it. I love it too.
Yeah,
I think for me, the only legacy game that I've actually played is The King's Dilemma, and I really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, we didn't finish it, but we did play 10 games of it, which I think is a pretty good shot. And I really enjoyed the political side of that, and that kind of the legacy game with the political aspect. But it felt like, after you played a lot of games, it didn't feel like there was a lot of stakes to it at the end of the day, because it was also a game that was trying to tell stories as well. So I have a game called Hegemony. You guys might have heard of it. It came out recently, which is quite a fun game, in my opinion. And I think that could be really cool legacy, because basically each person is controlling kind of a class in society, or potentially one person is controlling the government. And you're trying to make your class, so the capitalist class or the working class or the middle class, be more successful in that government, both through voting for certain policies, putting pressure on the government in certain ways. And I feel like that could be really interesting in a legacy game to see what happens to that country over time, because you could just have like crazy stuff happen according to the decisions, like according to the decisions that are made in terms of policies. Then you could have crazy situations to be in the next play of the game. So I could imagine those guys who made the game coming up with a really interesting legacy version of Hegemony. So that would be the game that I would like to play tomorrow in a legacy version.
So a follow-up question then around legacy games, and that is, you have to work on a Garphill game to have a legacy version. Which one is it and why?
I've already done it, man. I've done it.
Okay, so
Legacy of You.
Which game are you excited about revisiting or adding lots of spice?
So my answer is going to be quite boring, because it's going to be the only game that I've actually got design credits on, which is Circadian's Chaos Order, because my brother had some ideas around like what you could do with legacy, and so he started talking to me about it, and then I started thinking about it. I was like, there are some actually cool ways that you could do it to make it maybe not like a full legacy tear up everything game, but kind of like for a group to play a campaign of like a number of games in a row and have like really cool new mechanics or interesting things that happen between games. So yeah, I guess not full legacy, but kind of that more campaign, what Shem did with Legacy of You, but putting that into kind of a combat asymmetric area control context.
Nice.
Sam, you've got to answer it too.
Maybe Wayfarers. Wayfarers could be interesting with a legacy component. The map changes. Maybe you've actually got new artwork for different places that you're exploring. And you have some really funky, wacky rules around the journaling. You might add more cards to you could add story components, and then you could add cards to those decks. Like, a new planet has been discovered, all that sort of thing. You could some sort of permanence around your dice building board with your upgrades, but obviously not full permanence, but something that persists. I don't know. Yeah, I feel like something could be done there. Unique dice maybe would be kind of fun. Yeah, Wayfarers.
I would tend to lean towards more of a medium weight game for Legacy because you can start out simple and then bring in more mechanisms throughout the campaign. So I would lean towards probably Raiders or Architects for that reason. So even strip back the core game from what it currently is, like simplify Architects even a bit more, and then bring in mechanisms that people know in the first few chapters, and then bring in lots of crazy stuff that we've dabbled with expansions and even more stuff on top of that. So, and again, that's a cool game I can play with my kids. So
you heard it here first. Architect Legacy is coming out next year. Save your money. Get ready for the pre-order.
Stop it.
We need to put a disclaimer in here, like none of these ideas will be.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to the Lens and Veil podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Garphill Games. You can follow Garphill on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, and YouTube, or by joining the Garphill Discord server.